Good afternoon.
Hello.
It is Wednesday afternoon, and here we are. We are Dave and Laura Butler of Work Life Consulting. And just to give you a little background before we jump into today's discussion, you can see a little bit about what we've done over the past 30 years. So we'll be right back.
We're in it together. We're in it together. If you get off track, I got your back. Remember, oh yeah, we're in this together.
We always say we're in this together, and you're in with us as we have these conversations on Wednesdays about topics either from our clients, from what we hear out in the buzz, or what we like to talk about. And this one has been surfacing, wouldn't you say, Dave, over the past, I don't know, several months?
Yeah, I think that the topic of empathy seems to be coming up more and more. And I've been doing a little work with another friend of ours, writing about humanizing education. And I thought, what a great word to use to try and describe what leadership needs to do with our organizations. Humanizing, bringing the human element into what has turned out to be, the big machine, trying to make more and more human places to work. It's also being talked about quite a bit in this great new book that I'm reading by Gary Hamel called Humanocracy. He's one of my favorite writers, and the book is so on point. It's just perfect. And he talks about humanizing organizations and the whole effort that we have to try and bring empathetic leadership to bear so that people feel like they are understood, that they're heard, that they're connected, that they're, there's so much in the world today that seems to be driving things to pieces, turning things into little parts and pieces rather than integrating them and bringing them back into connection with each other.
Exactly. Well, one of the things that we promised to discuss is to have a little back and forth about what we know or what we think empathy is and why it's crucial. And so one of the things we've done recently, the client is going through, like so many companies, another round of downsizing, which we have certainly heard about since the 80s. That it sort of goes in waves, and this is another one of those waves. And so
Right.
what we created, we had we fine-tuned it a little bit, but we have a empathy assessment. And I think when you see the various pieces, let's share the slides. So this is basically defining what empathy is. And I love this word cloud here, because empathy is not sympathy. And, there's a wonderful short YouTube video, I think it's part of a TED Talk that Brene Brown has online. Empathy is not sympathy. And she says, something to the effect of, when people tell you something that they're going through, it's constantly like a yeah, but, so that you try, well, at least that's what it is. It's at least. So at least you have a job. At least you have a relationship.
Which is exactly right. It is at least.
Yeah. And I don't think that people would that's a very bare minimum, that people are going through something that's difficult. Empathy is not that. So we put together a couple of slides, and I think it's compassionate, it's connecting, hearing, listening, but it's these 5 bullets here. Understanding others is key. What are they feeling? What are their perspectives? It's certainly something we hear about and we know is crucial when we look at something like the Berkman assessment, the Berkman tool that we use. It's looking at another perspective that's different from my own, that I can then understand that person and try to help, and maybe I learn something in the process.
And maybe I also make myself more understandable to them.
Exactly. And along with that goes developing others, asking. I think there's a lot of assumption
Hmm.
in the workplace, and I think a lot of the assumptions come from the lack of knowledge around how to have these conversations.
Yeah, and
It's
with the rise of technology and pandemic and everything else, there's a lot more distance. We don't see each other. We don't get together as much. We're not in the same space. There's a lot of hybrid activity going on. We don't have a chance to even get together to, check each other out,
yeah.
breathe the same air, have a coffee. I mean, just connect.
The one I love is service orientation, because there have been a couple of examples that we've talked about over the years where the mindset of the leader is, how can I help?
Hmm.
And anticipating what those needs might be of either a member of the team or a client. And
Hmm.
certain one of my favorites is leveraging diversity. And I think you can't even get beyond the thought of diversity until you can celebrate a different perspective, a
Right.
diversity of thought, a different
Hmm.
point of view.
Right.
It doesn't mean we have to agree with it, but at least we can understand it. And this is where I always plug one of my favorite books, which is Questions Are the Answer
Hmm.
by Hal Gregerson. It's having I always say, a toolbox of open-ended questions at the
Right.
ready. It makes me feel more empowered and certainly helps others.
Right. And also becoming better listeners, or what you're listening to, and how to listen more effectively, how to let people know that you're hearing them. I think that's a big piece of empathy.
Absolutely. And then that political awareness,
Mhm.
reading the room.
Yeah.
What are the social and political currents that are out there, meaning what's going on in the organization,
Yeah.
what's happening that's causing some fear.
Right. Being sensitive to what's happening.
Exactly.
Hmm.
And then we have some pieces that we've created. We have a program called Leader as Coach. And in it, we have various pieces of pulling the conversations together in a way that can be much more effective. And so we are calling this, for today's summary, the keys to empathetic leadership.
Hmm.
It all starts with communication.
And certainly a big piece of coaching, especially leader as a coach. We could just add that being as a coach leader, you need to be more empathetic, as opposed to
Absolutely.
driving results and all that kind of stuff. How can we listen? How can we question? Your point about having better questions, but analyzing, developing options, and then being able to um, have clear objectives that you can help people be empowered to get to.
Well, I love the questioning one we have here is utilizing the Socratic method,
Right.
which is constantly asking questions.
Well, it's also, the Socratic method means that we don't really have to have any statements. Everything can be a question. I can question you into coming up with the right answer. I don't
Right.
have to tell you anything. I don't have to sell my idea. All I have to do is ask enough questions that I can actually listen to you into agreeing with me.
And then connection happens by analyzing and identifying goals and areas of strength, really taking a deep dive into what makes each of us tick, and
Mhm.
developing options, identifying opportunities. That's what it is. I mean, how many times, I think a lot of times, the fear kicks in because the feeling is, I don't have any options. I'm stuck. There's no
Right.
place to go.
Right. It's really just my point of view, and I haven't asked enough questions because there are always options.
Right. And if I don't ask those questions, if I don't listen, I, as a leader, may overlook the fact that here's a key employee that's going through some fearful times, and we
Mhm.
may lose that employee if we
Mhm.
don't embark in this kind of process. Objectives and trusting with authority, and empowering and encouraging that personal investment that's so important. And
Right.
then collaboration is all about building trust and giving honest feedback. We always say that feedback is a gift. Well,
Mhm.
are we really ready for the gifts that we
Yeah.
may receive?
You're willing to ask for feedback.
Exactly. And so, what we put together here is what do you listen for based on one of the key areas of Berkman that makes it unique is the ability to know what our motivators are, what our needs are. So, if we're setting up a listening partnership,
Mhm.
it's how, who, what, where, when, and why. So, we've created the red, green, blue, and yellow overlay here to sort of understand if I'm this color, then this is what I'm going to gravitate towards, but I might have blind spots in the others. Or somebody else could be a diagonal opposite from me, for example.
Right.
Um,
I think the focus is on do.
yeah,
How do you do it? Who's going to do it? Why are we doing it? And where and when are we going to do it?
exactly. And then how do you listen is, if you're in that red quadrant, you're going to be quick. You're going to be on the run, moving fast. If you're
Yeah,
in the green,
give it to me short.
right, enthusiastic, enthusiastically experimentally.
Hmm. Yeah.
Blue, maybe a little more quiet, thinking about the next step and the next action.
Hmm.
And then yellow as well could be, quietly looking for the definitions, looking
Right.
for the facts and the data.
Hmm. Yeah.
And then there's another piece that goes along with, the empathetic leader, which is creating environments that are psychologically safe. And we've been talking certainly about this in the past, but I think it's worth repeating because it's so important. And one of the key kind of foundations for a team program that we do alongside of Berkman is a program called High Performing Teams.
Hmm.
And within that is one of the pillars is psychological safety, coming out of Amy Edmondson's research. And it's an environment where teams actually feel safe to take risks and be vulnerable.
And actually being able to be empathic. It
Yeah.
takes time, it takes effort, it takes orientation. It's not just a skill. It's a I like to say a mindset that's important, and one feeds the other. The psychological safety feeds the empathy, and the empathy feeds the psychological safety. So it's a virtuous cycle.
Well, there was something I heard this morning, and I'm going to find it because I think it was so good.
Hmm.
James Joyce said, mistakes are the portals of discovery. And, how often do we kind of, I don't know, cut short people's different ideas,
Right.
minimize them? Where'd you get that?
I
Uh,
tried that. It didn't work.
yeah, and it becomes we don't elevate the discussion to share out of the box ideas.
Hmm.
So it just kind of falls short, and we lose the conversation.
Yeah.
By the way, we are Laura and Dave Butler of Work Life Consulting. If you're joining us live, thank you for joining us, and add some comments or questions you may have. If you're listening to the recording, thank you for joining us, and also leave a comment or question if you have anything that you'd like us to share and get back to you with. So, how do you evaluate if your team is psychologically safe? How does your team feel about its current levels? It's just as simple as that. Where are we? Like what I've done in workshops before is kind of take the foundation of trust and say, where are we on a scale of 1 to 5?
Hmm.
5 being really high, 1 being low. And I've found, have been very open and honest to answer that freely.
Yeah.
What are 2 risks that could result from a lack of psychological safety? And that might be unique to each team, but it could be a risk of presenting a new idea, a risk of partnering with somebody you haven't worked with before.
Hmm.
Those are all things that elevate the conversation, allow for growth, And we'll expand what we call these opportunities or Scrum models.
Yeah. And I mean, in the end, we need to be able to talk about our failures, our difficulties openly and honestly, rather than hiding, rather than pretending that they didn't happen, because then nobody learns.
And then thirdly, what might be in the way of creating a more psychologically safe environment? And these are things that can be, an ongoing conversation. Could be somebody sees it and brings it up to the group, and they come up with a way that they work through it.
I think people have a tendency to wait and see and wait for somebody else to do it. Well, it's up to you too. I mean, be the psychological safety you'd like to have.
Exactly. And then here's the program that we have been doing, helping teams to create these environments. That starts with purpose, followed by clarity and psychological safety. So it's called High Performing Teams. And let us know if you have any questions about the program or how we can help you otherwise. So I think it is certainly a time to expand the conversation. And anything else you would add before we close out today?
Well, what always comes up to me is that adaptable mind video has quite a bit in it. If you get a chance, anybody might want to Google that. You can usually find it from an organization called Let It Ripple. And in there, they talk about how there's been a significant drop in empathy over the last 20 years. There have been studies done on this from Harvard and other places that it seems like the world is becoming colder and colder, just when we need it to be warmer and warmer.
Good point. And, that video has really interesting attributes of what's necessary in the world today. And one of the key ones is empathy. So thank you for listening. We are here every week and we have different topics that we share. So please leave a comment, ask a question.
Or give us a topic you'd like to hear about, and we'd be happy to incorporate it.
And as I mentioned earlier, how can we help? So see you next time. And we'll close out with our dear friend, Elliot Lewis, and a shorter version of We're in This Together with Elliot. So thanks for listening. See you next time.